You wanna share your secrets for your LinkedIn flow these days?
Yeah, so I'm a certified coach for the Y Institute, and I fell in love with the Y Institute when I was introduced to it because I spend all my time thinking about why, because stories are about why.
Yeah.
And beautifully, of course, for our conversation, there's a connection there to innovation, right? With why this, why, what's possible, and why do we want this? So I'm a coach, and we have these monthly coach calls. And in fact, I'm missing one right now, so that to have this conversation,
gonna apologize to the coaches.
No, it's me. It's a benefit for me as a coach. We all get together and we learn things. And so a couple months ago, I was on one of the calls, and there was this a fellow Y coach, and I'd not met him before. I think he's a Y coach, but he joined. He's friends with the CEO of the Y Institute, and he has for the longest time been running a consultancy where he advises on LinkedIn strategy. Right? We've all come across the folks who sell those services.
Yeah, create your content farm, get your followers,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And some of them are really good, right? And those ones who are really good will actually coach you and help you.
Yep.
And so he's taken many people through this process. And he looked at all this AI stuff that was happening and looked at all the advice he was giving his clients about interacting and commenting on posts and all this good stuff. And he's created a tool called Evai, and it is a Chrome plugin that helps you with your LinkedIn content. It helps you do your posts, comment on posts, anything you'll be doing on LinkedIn helps you with your title or your whatever, your profile. It makes recommendations on that. For me, what I use every single day is I use the comment feature, because as I have ADHD and dyslexia, I agonize over my communication, ironically, right? As a communicator and a storyteller. And I'm always worried. I get that from my mum. I always worry about, I'm quite an antagonist. I like challenging the status quo. And I worry that my comments might come across as a little bit antagonistic rather than trying to stimulate the conversation that I'm trying to stimulate. And funnily enough, the more I've used this tool, the more I've become aware of the delta between what I thought I wanted to say and what would be maybe a way of saying it that, especially in America, wouldn't upset people. And this tool helps me with that. So it looks at, if I'm going to respond to Ian, and I've done it to your posts.
So you've AI replied my posts.
I have.
It sounds like you.
And sometimes I have to tune it. I normally have to do a little bit of sprinkles, right? A little bit of the seasoning. Sometimes I have to make complete changes. Sometimes it just doesn't work, and I have to go to ChatGPT to get,
Sure.
And sometimes I just write it myself. But
sometimes you have to fall back on actually, doing it yourself.
Just going to do the comment. But most of the time, call it 80% of the time, it gives me a recommendation. I make a few tweaks, and it's good to go.
Yeah.
And especially when I select a couple drop downs, you, by the way, create a profile in the app when you subscribe to it. Make sure you tell it about yourself, the words you use, your style, all this kind of stuff.
Sure, it's like training a GPT or anything like that.
It literally is.
Context.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, this is a productivity enhancer. Like, we talk so much about tech. There's a lot of narrative around, what jobs will AI replace and how does it change the value equation of creators and producers. And that's real conversation. But the flip side of that is this productivity enhancement, right? That lets you sort of tune your engagement, the social ecosystem. I think that's really cool.
And the biggest impact for me, well, there's been two. The first one is I'm able to do a lot more interaction on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And the second is that then has a positive impact on people looking at my profile, the conversations I'm having, people going to our website, the lead gen tools that we have on the website that then result in that. But for me, it's really about accelerating that experience. The problem I've always had with email, text messages, social media, is how I come across in those mediums. I tend to come across a lot better in person. And I can even throw a few grenades into the conversation, and then I can be like, that was intentional. Let's talk about this, right? Yeah. And that was a glass. I almost said a grass ceiling. There's a story. There's a funny joke about glass houses, and I'll have to tell you. Maybe we'll do it on this conversation. But a glass ceiling I had in corporate America was created by that, and so the ability. I honestly see it as a tool that helps me with my disability. I have a disability, and it feels weird to say that as somebody by any measure is in a very, what would be, common terminology, say privileged,
Sure.
position. But disability is really answering the question, are you expected to be able to operate in a certain way in society, to be able to function effectively in society? The metaphor there is, why do we have disabled parking spots outside shops? It's because you can't park on the other side of the car park,
right,
and have the same experience if you're, say, in a wheelchair or some other physical.
It's a tool that closes the gap.
Yeah. And so for me, AI has just blown the lid off that from a electronic communications perspective.
Well, I think from an innovation perspective, I think it's just such a great example of a use case that's very, very personal and sort of how you applied it. Now, I do have to ask you. I mean, we're coming up on our time here, but we'll see. This may get us down a rabbit hole. There's maybe a flip side to this, right? Like, you're using this to increase the quality, the quantity of your engagement. Builds your profile, which is important. And it also, frankly, makes people feel good when you're commenting and interacting with their stuff. So there's a lot of positive. What's the end state here, though? Like, we talk about tech changing constantly. This wouldn't have been possible 2 years ago. It's really not very good a year ago. 2 years from now, are we just going to be in a world where the AI is actually doing it for you, and we just have AIs talking to each other, and that is everything that we see in the discussion sphere? Like, how do we keep a human element in this?
You've asked several holy grail questions,
Yeah, I know, right? I'm going to invest on your answer. So,
hopefully, this conversation could be a positive contribution to whatever this ends up being. It's interesting, right? Because there is a point where we can create technology which, to all intents and purposes, is as intricate and as complicated as the human brain, right? We are actually, I would say, we're quite a long way off from that, honestly. And it's worth taking that beat, taking that pause, and thinking to ourselves about the fact that generative AI is not AI.
It is not AGI,
It's
perhaps,
not.
to use the general intelligence terminology, which nobody can define anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. And I remember years ago when we were both back in corporate America, it was probably around about 2014, 15, probably. There was a huge explosion of conversation around machine learning.
Sure.
And quite frankly, kudos and round of applause to everybody who was getting stuck in at that time, because those people are the people who have created the technology that we're now seeing that's proving so useful, and is a really good example of how stuff takes a while to net out. That's not to say that means everything's going to take as long. And to your point, Ian, yeah, things are accelerating.